Now time to bring you the part two of the interview segment. Now, according to the latest economic report from the Central Bank of Nigeria, the country recorded a foreign exchange inflow of $55.5 billion in 7 months, which is a significant increase compared to the $18.3 billion in the preceding period. Going by the Apex Bank data, the rise in Forex inflow was attributed to increased non-oil receipts and proceeds from Eurobonds, among other factors, while the foreign exchange inflow into the economy was about $7 billion in October compared to the $13.38 billion which was recorded in the month of September last year. However, receipts from all related sources fell by 2.7% to hit $1.86 billion relative to the value in the second quarter of the year 2021, as foreign exchange inflows through autonomous sources was also $13.37 billion compared with $11.79 billion in the preceding period, as a result of improved inflow from invisible purchases and non-oil export receipts. Joining me now for more on this and analyzing the impact of the figures we have in terms of the contribution to the country's economic output and more, I have partner tax reporting and strategy at PricewaterhouseCoopers PwC, Kenneth Erikume. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, Tolu, for having me. Good afternoon, everybody.
Well, Tolu is in Abuja having a special coverage. It's David here. Kenneth, starting our conversation, let's look at the rise in Forex inflow now, which is attributed to the increased non-oil receipts and proceeds from Eurobonds, as well as the SDR allocation. However, how do we begin to build a much more robust base to secure even greater volumes of Forex inflow? Forex scarcity really remains a hurdle we are yet to successfully cross over. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you very much once again. Yeah, so, I mean, when you look at the $55 billion inflow over the, 7 months, what many people don't realize is that, that's between March and October. So that's not a lot. And then you look at how that has scaled out over that 7 months. In Q2, it was about 18 billion. In Q3 was about 30 billion, and then it fell back to 7 billion in October. And when you extrapolate that 1 month, then you're looking at something in the region of 15 billion. So the obvious outlier there is Q3. So in Q3, the CBN rightly explained that what some of that increase was attributed to SDR allocation, which is coming from the sort of reserve that countries have with the IMF, and then the Eurobonds proceeds. So if you remember, Nigeria has issued some Eurobonds in 2021, and the proceeds of that borrowing flowed into the economy in Q3 2021. So if you look at the other quarters, the extrapolation of 1 month to 3 months, about you do 7 times 3, that's about 21 billion. Q2 was about 18 billion. It means that our foreign currency inflow, the stable one, would be around 18 to 21 billion dollars per quarter, and that's not a lot. So you rightly identify that it's important as a country that more sustainable means of increasing that inflow is actually crucial. Considering that there are challenges from an economic perspective in terms of liquidity or forex, that becomes very important to address some of the issues that the private sector is experiencing. And to do that, I think some of the policies that the government has come up with in the past to address forex liquidity are quite laudable, but they're not enough. So some of the things we need to now begin to look at is how we can scale up economic activity for more backward integration. In addition, look at more structures to ensure that we boost, export and output, especially in areas where we have competitive advantage. And if you look at historically where we've shown some competence in terms of exports, we've shown competence in the export of commodities, but we've also shown much better competence in actually providing services that are exported out of the country. So our banking, our fintech industry, shared services, and those are some of the strategies that some countries like India have deployed in the past to good effect. The situation in Nigeria is such that we are producing a significant number of graduates per time, and then the unemployment rate is quite high.
Okay, Kenneth.
If you look at what other countries have done with that, is that yeah.
So if I'm a button here now, do you really think,
Yes,
in terms of looking at the how do we get better at also having a much more robust base? Do you think the MPC has also set the right tempo, looking at the activities of last year in terms of having to attract inflows, and also the right momentum for the year 2022? We just had the Monetary Policy Committee meeting in the month of January, and looking at monetary expansion and issues around fiscal imbalances. How do you think we can go around these issues and also have the MPC have much more stimulating or incentivizing elements that will bring a bigger pull in terms of our forex inflow? We seem to have some reconnection issues there. We've been speaking with Kenneth Erikomo, partner tax reporting and strategy at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Kenneth, thank you very much for still staying with us. Now, I was just talking about setting the tempo right for the year 2022. In terms of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, which was held in the month of January, looking at how we also set the right pace to ensure that we have a much more robust base, and also for the year 2021 in terms of the performance and what you saw out there in terms of attending to monetary expansion and issues around fiscal imbalances. How do we navigate through these just to ensure we have a bigger resource or reserve base?
Right. So a few things I think we can do from our perspective. One of it is, ensuring that we deal with the issue of predictability and consistency of exchange rates, because from a foreign direct investment perspective, that is one of the issues that from a private sector perspective is actually a concern. So for investors, they want to be able to bring their money, and at the time they generate profits, they have to pay for technology, they have to pay for shared services and things like that. They want to be sure that they can actually remit those proceeds as at when due. What we have from a Nigerian perspective is sometimes the ability to make those payments is suppressed. So we have several regulatory challenges which companies have to go through. For example, if you have to make payment for technology, then you have to get your contract approved by the National Office for Technology Acquisition and Promotion. And many times, that process of approval is quite onerous and difficult for the private sector. So when an investor is looking at some of all these challenges, it becomes difficult for them to inflow additional, investment into the Nigerian economy. There are also some particular, challenges in terms of, removal of foreign currency restrictions on imports and staple foods and medicines. I know on the back end, what we're trying to do is to ensure that we drive more backward integration and secure domestic production of some of these items. But that has to be structured in such a way that there's an actual plan for that to happen in a phased manner, so that investors who already have made material investments in the past into the Nigerian economy have sufficient access to Forex for repatriations. So those are some of the things that needs to be done. Of course, on the fiscal side, I think some activity have also happened. The passage of the Petroleum Industry Act removed some uncertainty around investment in the oil and gas sector. So what we begin to see from 2022 going forward, actually from 2023, because a lot of transition needs to happen, is that we may begin to see attraction of investment. Previously, we lost out as a country to a lot of the investments that could have come into the oil and gas sector due to uncertainty, as well as disputes in terms of the fiscal situation in Nigeria. So all of those things, I think the PIA should be able to provide some certainty to investors and attract more investment to that sector.
Okay, now, Kenneth, we're wrapping up our conversation, but with the mutating COVID-19 virus and looking at the fragility of the global economy, the outlook still remains blurry, to say the least. Now, in the best and worst case scenario now, in terms of diaspora remittances, how do you see things playing out? I'm going to ask a 3-in-1 question, and also looking at the fact that we are also dealing with skyrocketing debt service burden. How do you see us having any chance at all? And looking at the fate of the Naira, stability and sanitizing our foreign exchange regime as well, how do you think we can deal with all of these realities which paint different pictures of how Nigeria is faring today?
Yeah, so COVID-19, I think we have experienced 2 recessions, in recent past, and we are coming out of that. So in 2021, we saw a modest growth in terms of GDP, 4% or above 4% compared to the 3%, which was actually targeted in the budget. So in terms of the trajectory, I think it's looking up. I think that's the first thing. However, 4% is not good enough. And we've been saying this for a bit, that in order to create wealth and make the economy more robust, the GDP growth has to accelerate and be faster than population growth. Otherwise, when you have a situation where the population growth is ahead of GDP growth, you see that more people will be pushed into the poverty line, as we have seen in recent past. So to ensure that there is, sustained improvement in terms of GDP increase, a lot still needs to be done to ensure that the economy thrives. Considering that COVID-19 has set in, but what we're seeing from the global market perspective is that there is a lot of recovery and pent-up demand for goods and services. So that is one of the reasons why you're seeing, that the price of crude oil, for example, is increasing, because there's more demand from industrialized countries to process and get the petroleum products into the industries to create wealth. And I think from our perspective, that's the sort of positioning that we need to look at. For foreign remittances, especially from Nigerians in diaspora, that has been one of the critical sources of Forex from the Nigerian perspective. And in terms of the strategy, it won't be enough to just deal with that through policies such as the reduction of charges for remittances or the introduction of e-Naira, because at the end of the day, it may still make more economic sense for these guys to remit those funds, and it's converted at the parallel market where the exchange rate is higher compared to what they get from official channels. So what we need to do is to see how we can incentivize such remittances a bit more, and also see how we can mobilize the funds for specific investments. What we are seeing, for example, in some sectors is that people in diaspora are looking at crowdfunding certain investments, around healthcare, around education and things like that. So if we can package some of these potential investments
Exactly.
for Nigerians in diaspora, that could attract additional investment.
Thank you so much for your contribution on the show today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Kenneth Erikuma, partner, tax reporting and strategy at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you for your time on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.